Welcome to this course, Green Economy from China's Stories. Let's talk about Chapter 10. In this section, we will study a specific case related to China's environmental policies and review the types of environmental policies and assessment standards we have learned. This case is related to the river chief policy that we may often hear in our daily life. I will take the river chief policy implemented in the Yangtze River Economic Belt as an example to explain. Why do I take the Yangtze River Economic Belt as an example? Because there are two goals, namely economic goals and ecological environment protection, to be achieved within the Yangtze River Economic Belt. It is an issue demanding prompt solution to make the environmental protection in this area meet standards. As the largest economic belt in the world, the Yangtze River Economic Belt covers 9 provinces and 2 municipalities, and an area of 2.05 million square kilometers, and it supplies for 500 million people. After the completion of the South to North Water Division project, the Yangtze River would supply water for 800 million people, making it the river system with the largest water volume and the widest watershed in China. On the other hand, the Yangtze River Economic Belt is one of the important industrial centers in the country. Its discharge amount of wastewater accounts for 43% of the total wastewater discharge amount of the country, of which the discharge amount of COD accounts for more than half of the total discharge amount of COD of the country. COD is an important indicator that we use to measure pollutants in the water. Among 10 pollution incidents happened in China in the early 21st century, 5 of them occurred in the Yangtze River Basin. Therefore, the water pollution control in the Yangtze River Economic Belt received great attention from the central government and the public. How do we implement environmental protection policies in this region to make it achieve both economic growth and environmental protection? It will be also an important example to other regions of the country. We can see from the figure below that the Yangtze River Economic Belt is not only an important agricultural production base, but also an important industrial base. There are many chemical enterprises along the Yangtze River Economic Belt, and chemical enterprises are important source of water pollution. At the same time, chemical enterprises also recruit a large number of employees. Therefore, controlling water pollution while ensuring the normal development of industry and agriculture in the Yangtze River Economic Belt is a difficult and important issue. This is also a great challenge for the use of environment policy instruments. Okay, we will introduce River Chief Policy. What is River Chief Policy? What are the characteristics of River Chief Policy? The River Chief Policy refers to the principles of the party and governments at all levels of China act as river chief, who will be responsible for managing water of corresponding reaches of river, organizing and leading the management and the protection of the corresponding rivers and lakes. This policy was first implemented in Wuxi City of Jiangsu Province. In 2007, there are a large bloom of blue-green algae in Taihu Lake in 2007. In order to treat the water pollution. Wuxi City introduced and implemented the river chief policy. The river chief was fully responsible for the treatment of blue-green algae in Taihu Lake. By 2008 and 2009, the water quality of Taihu Lake has been improved significantly. People in the surrounding provinces and cities thought that the river chief policy was so effective and began to implement this policy in their own cities. Then the river chief policy has been gradually implemented in Zhejiang province. During the next few years, people in other provinces and cities along the Yangtze River also gradually used the river chief policy. In 2016, the General Office of the Central Committee of the CPC and the General Office of the State Council issued the opinions on the full implementation of the river chief policy and request all cities and provinces should put these policies seriously and to fully implement it throughout the country by the end of 2018. Thus, the river chief policy started to get popular used in China. What are the characteristics of the river chief policy? Firstly, the river water management effect of the river chief policy is linked to assessment and promotion of local government officials. That is, it is a target-oriented governance model. Secondly, unlike a GDP model that local governments previously pursued, the river chief policy pursues environmental effects. Another characteristic of the river chief policy is that, unlike a top-down environmental governance model, it is a bottom-up environmental governance model innovated by local governments and then promoted by the central government. Well, let's take a look at the time sequence of implementation of the river chief policy by cities along the Yangtze River. In 2007, Wuxi City of Jiangsu Province became the first city to implement the river chief policy. By 2013, this policy had been implemented in 16 cities at a prefecture level or above, along the Yangtze River by local governments. In 2016, the State Council adopted the opinions on the full implementation of the river chief policy, and by the end of 2018, this policy has been fully enforced throughout the country. What are the specified policies and measures of the river chief policies? The implementation time and specific contents of the river chief policy of each city are different. Measures are also follows. According to the contents we have learned in this chapter, we divide the river chief policies into command and control policy, market incentive policy, and public supervision policy. The river chief policy are government-led policy, so we exclude voluntary lease policy and add government investment policy. Specifically, each type of policy contains various specific means. For example, the command and control policy involves establishing a four-level river chief organization system, namely a system at municipal, county, township, and the village level, with leaders of government at all levels being the river chiefs with specific levels. Formulating of a system of assessment, rewards, and punishments, setting specific policy targets for river pollution control and emission reduction, shutting down polluting enterprises, monitoring factor sewage discharge, taking special actions such as dismantling illegal constructions and cleaning wharves, investigating and treating cases in violation of relevant environmental laws, eliminating backward industries, especially chemical production capacity, to facilitate the entry of chemical enterprises into industrial parks. Not all cities implemented these measures. For example, during the voluntary implementation period, in and before 2013, Wuxi, Suqian, Xuzhou, Yangzhou, Nanjing, and Yibin implemented the above measures. Another type of the river chief policy is a government investment-based policy. Specifically, it involves building sewage treatment plants and large-scale livestock and poultry farms, controlling pollution, providing supporting facilities, allocating funds for water surface cleaning, promoting the incorporation of domestic sewage into pipe networks, and providing special fiscal funds for wastewater treatment. Before 2013, these measures were implemented only in Suqian, Yancheng, Suzhou, Shiyan, Xuzhou, Jiaxing, Nanjing, Lianyungang, Chongqing. As for pollutant emission tax we mentioned before, ecological compensation mechanisms have been established in some cities, such as cities in the middle and lower reaches of the Yangtze River, like Jiaxing, Wuxi, Huai'an, Shiyan, Yangzhou, Lianyungang, Fuyang, Chongqing. As a municipality located in the upper reaches of Yangtze River has also implemented a market economic-based policy. Besides, many cities have implemented public supervision-based policies such as disclosing information by media, conducting on-site work, installing monitoring equipment and GPS position system, establishing river chief policy unified bulletin boards, making clear river chief management protection requirements, making public supervision through telephone number and other information, accepting public supervision. The following figures show the policy effect of the river chief policy after the implementation of many mutually coordinated environmental policies. We can see from the figure below that the water quality of the Yangtze River basin has been gradually improved since 2008. We can see from this figure that from 1998 to 2008, the water quality of the Yangtze River basin gradually declined. But since 2008, it has been gradually improved. This line represents the qualification rate of water class 3. Quality of class 3 refers to the water quality complying the requirements for drinking water for human beings, so it is an important reference. Of course, the water quality improvement since 2008 may be not probably because of the implementation of the river chief policy. There may be any other socio-economic variables. However, through rigorous data model analysis, we have proved that the river chief policy has indeed played an important role in improving water quality. From the other two figures, we can roughly see the policy effect in cities implementing the river chief policy has been proved a lot. The orange columns represent the COD in 2015, and the blue columns represent the COD content in 2004. This is the COD content of cities implementing the River Chief policy. Next, let's see the figure showing the comparison results of the COD content in surface water of cities not implementing the River Chief policy. We can see that for most cities from 2004 to 2015, the COD in the river did not change significantly, and the COD content of some cities even increased. Through this case, we have found that an effective environment policy requires the coordination of various specific measures so as to achieve the goals. China's environment government policy has evolved from the command and control policy in the 1990s to the market policy, then the voluntary list policy, and public supervision policies have emerged, and various policies coordinated with each other under the same policy framework. And all these reflect the diversity of environment governance measures of China and its advancement with the time. Let's call it a day. Thank you. That's all for this course.